today about I'm going to tell you today about Pitt's AI activities and the process of rethinking education and operations and research in a world where AI is a thing. But before I do that, let me just say a couple more words about my background. So you just heard I have a PhD in AI and neuroscience. But I spent most of my career at MIT Lincoln Laboratory. I started their first cybersecurity group. I ran 5 consecutive ones. The top left picture there is of one of my leadership teams. Mike joined my group from Northeastern University, where he was faculty. He did hardware security. Just to give you an idea of who I was working with, Kevin Carter there was at the beginning of his career, but now he's responsible for integrating AI into Microsoft 365. So if you hate little Copilot things up here on the left, I think Kevin's responsible for that. And then Bill Stryline just left the lab. He's now the Chief Technology Officer at No Bliss. I also was the Director of the Laboratory for Physical Sciences at the University of Maryland. I maintain a very small research program in computer security and AI applications for university operations. But most of my time is actually spent on trying to enable bigger team science here. And so that's usually accomplished through making sure we have the right research infrastructure here so that our faculty can do leading edge research. I also get involved in strategic cross-school, cross-university collaboration. So I'm working with West Virginia University on the READY Consortium. I'm the co-PI here at Pitt. Pitt and CMU have a collaboration that's gone back to the 1990s, where I sort of helped reboot that here. It's known as the Center for the Neural Basis of Cognition. It had been dormant for 4 or 5 years. And then I'm also the executive director for the Pittsburgh Quantum Institute. And there's a bunch of efforts related to that I collaborate with WVU. So I'm going to pause for just a second and say, because part of my responsibility are these cross-school, cross-university collaborations, if at any point you think that West Virginia University would like to be able to collaborate with Pitt on something, please reach out. Now you know me a little bit, and I would be more than happy to talk to you about what we might do together. I've worked with some amazingly talented people at WVU, and I would love to meet a few more and work with a few more. All right, here's how I've outlined the rest of the talk. I just want to start with a little bit of level setting. I've heard that you guys have quite diverse backgrounds, and I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. So I'm going to spend a moment or two talking about AI and what it means. I can come back to that in the future of it if you would like, but I'll leave that for later. Then we're going to talk about reconsidering the university. I think AI offers an opportunity for us to think about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and we're actively trying to do that here at Pitt. And then I'm going to go through educational research and operational activities on AI. I want to be clear that I'm not the one who's doing all of this. I'm just trying to roll up for you all of the things that we're trying to do, just so you have a sense. All right, let's start with a little bit of level setting here. So some of you know this very well, but others may not. So AI has been around for a long time, going back 70, 80 years. And the traditional AI, the AI that I studied on for my PhD, did classification and categorization quite well. So you could ask it to do things like find me pictures of dogs. And, I've sort of indicated what that looks like here, but I'll point out that this is a surprisingly challenging problem. You can't do the classification just on color, because if you're looking for a white fur coat, cats have white fur coats. Cats have black fur coats, and so do dogs, right? The shapes of them are quite varied. They can be short, they can be tall, right? And so doing that and doing that well is kind of an amazing thing, and it's been around for quite a long time, and it's been used extensively in all kinds of commercial applications. The big new advance from, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago now is generative AI, where you can actually ask the AI system to build something for you. So this is from a few years ago. I asked one of the systems, I think it was ChatGPT, to create a photorealistic image of a smart dog on an advisory board. And all right, this is pretty cool, right? So it knows that if you're on an advisory board, you need to be wearing a tie. And if you're smart, well, you probably have glasses on. Oh, by the way, I forgot to put these on. There we go. And you're maybe looking at a spreadsheet and reviewing things as well. So like that's an astounding amount of stuff to pull together and then be able to build an image out of it is fantastic. So that's what's able to be done now. And the reason that we care about this is because after decades of working on classification and categorization problems, we kind of maxed out the performance on all of those algorithms. And um, what we had to do was turn to uh, standardized tests that were used to assess knowledge and expertise and understanding for humans. And so some of that included things like AP exams in calculus or literature, uniform bar exam for law, AP biology and math and history. And the vertical axis here is the score that you got on the particular test. And there's a couple of things that are interesting. So if you go back to one of the first big releases, ChatGPT 3 in November of 2022, that's sort of the blue lines here. And you can see that there are quite a few things that were passing, like biology, math, and history, but there were some that were not, like calculus and English literature. But by March of 2023, we went from, about a third of all of the exams that were being given passing to, maybe two-thirds of them all passing. But there were still some that could not yet be passed. English literature exams and AP calculus exams were not able to be passed just yet. And in many cases, like this improvement has still continued. So the first thing I would like to say is, holy cow, in the course of, this was like 6 months, that was an unbelievable leap in performance, especially relative to the 50, 60 years that had gone before. But even with that leap of performance, there were still some answers that were either biased or confabulated. The results were not responsible, ethical, or safe. There's still outstanding questions about intellectual property and fair use, because in order to train these models, the companies basically sucked down all of the internet and many, many books within it and didn't actually pay people for that content. Lots of lawsuits are still outstanding. And I just want to talk about what can go wrong here for a second, because in the world where the companies are talking, they typically highlight the potential upsides and they ignore the downsides. So, all right, when I say confabulations, some people use hallucinations, but I don't want to personify these things. They're machines. Here's what I mean. You can ask a system, how many eyes does a giraffe have? And it will nicely and confidently answer to you, a giraffe has 2 eyes. But then you can ask it things like, how many eyes does my foot have? And it will nicely and confidently answer you, the foot has 2 eyes, right? So it generalized, but not in a way that has any bearing on reality. So those sorts of things, those sorts of problems still exist. There's a bunch of additional scaffolding that's been put around these to limit this, but it's still very much a problem. I also want to highlight that there are biases in these. So it turns out that Amazon used AI systems to determine who it would bring in for interviews. And what the system learned was that Amazon hired more men than women, more people with men's names than women. Now, it turns out that if you're mostly hiring in computer science, the majority of the people who graduate with those degrees are men. That doesn't mean that the women who graduate are bad. It just means that there's this, you know, uh, bias towards more men being available, and therefore when more men were hired, and the system basically learned that Amazon prefers, as opposed to just that's what the incoming group looked like. In addition, healthcare decisions. There have been systems that have been built around how do you issue healthcare. Systems have learned things like offer less healthcare to Black people than to white people. So lots of problems related to this, and we have to think about that when we're thinking about how we're going to roll this out across a university. All right, so let's back up a little bit and talk a little bit about what this means. Why are we going to reconsider the university? What are some of the implications here? And what did Pitt do to move forward? So the first thing that we did was we pulled together an ad hoc committee on generative AI in research and education. And this was a group that was led by an educational leader here at Pitt and an ethical leader here at Pitt. And it met for a bunch of months starting in 2023. I was on the team here. And part of what we did was we tried to do some benchmarking, understanding what others were doing. We identified topics and places where we thought Pitt could lead. There's a report that's available. If you just search for this committee, you can find it online. But we basically made four major recommendations to my boss, Rob Rutenbar, the Senior Vice Chancellor for Research, and to the Provost. And the four recommendations were to, one, provide high quality, ethical, generative AI tools to the faculty so faculty could play with it and figure out how to use it. Second one was to develop policy for sensitive contexts like hiring and admission and evaluations. And given what I just said, I hope you can see why that's important. Third thing was to be able to foster an AI literate campus culture for faculty, staff, and students. And then the fourth thing was to be able to integrate AI tools as appropriate to promote a student-centered educational culture. So those are the four major recommendations. If you go to the report, there's also a long list of concerns and considerations for the administration to take into account. And what I'm going to do for the rest of the talk is show you a little bit about how we've tried to follow up on all four of those. So since that's part of my job, I tried to make some of those things actually come to pass. But before I get there, I want to just remind you that there is, just because we finished that committee doesn't mean we're done. There's quite a lot going on still. There's a committee that actually has been meeting for a couple of weeks now that we're now calling the AI Coordination and Development Committee, ACDC. It's led out of the Provost's office. I'm the representative from the research office, but we have representatives from the Chief Technology Office, the CFO's office, and from the School for Medicine. And just the idea here is we want to be able to coordinate our AI activities across the university. There's an ongoing committee on ethics and economics of expertise related to, as I said, when I was showing you that nice graph, many of these companies literally stole intellectual property to be able to build these models. And the questions are related to, how are we going to think about what we offer to our students into the future? And so, there's quite a lot of people, about 30 of us get together on it. And the structure of this is we continue to read about the university's role. How did the university come about? What sort of innovation and behavior are we responsible for? And then sometimes we read about AI ethics and we talk about how we might integrate that better. I would say nothing specific has come out of it other than quite a lot of learning for those of us who participated in it. And then the last thing is, following up on making some of these things, some of the capabilities available that I described in this slide. There's faculty education going on, either per school or per tool, and I'll describe that in a couple of minutes. But before I get into the details of what are we doing with AI, I just want to pause for a moment and talk about faculty and staff concerns. Because, I think some of the takeaways I had from the committees, from the various committees that I've participated on, is that faculty and staff across the university, and sometimes students as well, do not universally see AI as a positive thing. Some are worried about loss of employment. Literally, will AI replace me? Is a serious question that some people are worried about. Others are worried about loss of connection. Here the question is, will AI mediate my interactions with the people that I care about? And is that going to be bad for me and bad for our community and bad for our society? I will tell you personally, I'm less concerned about the first thing for most of our faculty and staff, but I'm definitely worried about the second thing, this loss of connection, this idea that we would have AI intermediate is not good, I don't think, and I'm quite worried about it. There's concerns about loss of intellectual property. What's going to happen if AI starts stealing my inventions or my writing style or my artistic style? And there's concerns about the loss of the next generation. And so, like I've heard this over and over again from faculty across many different departments. Will my students use AI in a way that cheapens or lessens their university experience or limits what it is that they learn or limits their ability to learn how to learn? And so I like to pause there for a second because we're going to talk a lot about technology and things that we've put together and made available. But I think it's super important that we spend a little bit of time thinking about these concerns and how we're going to address them. So maybe I'll pause. Do you guys have a question or two, or shall I just proceed on? What would you like to do?
I mean, if you want, we can proceed and we can just have the discussion at the end because this is a very important issue that has been brought at the university before. That would be nice if
Okay.
we have it at the end.
Okay, that's what I'll do. All right, let me jump in. So let's talk about education first, then research, and then operations. So education first. So the first thing that we tried to do was make university-wide uh, material available. And Pitt is lucky to have this extremely talented group of people that's in our University Center for Teaching and Learning. And the first thing we did was we drafted syllabus language so that faculty could incorporate it directly into their syllabi. So it includes a couple of different models. The no way, no how model of you can't use AI anywhere. There's the, use AI only where explicitly listed. And then there's the use AI as you want, but you have to acknowledge it in some sort of a way. So that's online. You're welcome to take a look at it yourself. I would say that, you know, it's gotten some uptake, maybe not as much as I would have liked, but I think it's quite good. It tends to lean towards encouraging faculty to use AI to understand that it's a thing that's out there and that our students are playing with it and that they're going to use it. So you have to actually put down a an opinion. What do you want them to use it? Do you not want them to use it, and how? And we tend to think that it's going to come, so they might as well learn how to use it, and we might as well figure it out and wrestle with it now. Um, we also put together these 5 key generative AI strategies for better teaching. I love these. This is a whole essay. I would encourage you to go search that out. I try to encourage our own faculty to do it, but the 5 ideas are, first focus on use of AI and not misuse. I find myself getting into conversations where faculty are worried about students cheating. That's a thing. It's absolutely a thing. But if you think about how you can use AI, it turns out that you can go farther, faster in some of the material you want, and you can still have a good educational experience for students. So that's our first piece of advice. The second is to design a clear and fair policy. Like I said, our students know about AI. That's not changing, so you might as well be clear about what you want and what you don't want. We encourage people to adopt generative AI as a tool and then adapt it for your course. So you have to figure out exactly where you're going to use it and how you're going to use it. And that ranges quite a lot. So some of that is about using AI as a way to get an introduction to an area and get pointers. It turns out that because of some of the additional scaffolding that's been put onto these generative AI models, you can actually ask these systems for pointers to other references. And most of the time, not entirely all the time, but most of the time, it'll give you useful things. So if you want some interesting idea generation at the beginning of figuring out a class project, that's a good use of generative AI, for example. There are lots of others as well that might be useful in other fields. And then, redesign assignments to promote AI literacy. And then the last time is to spend a little bit of time helping students learn how to do generative AI discerningly. As I said at the very beginning, there are problems with AI. It's not perfect. It has errors. It'll give you incorrect references. It'll tell you things that are not quite right. And if our students understand that and then spend a little time checking, they're going to just be better off. So anyway, so that I think is quite good at the education level. Um, a major effort, this is not yet announced, but it'll be announced in the next maybe month, is on our healthcare side. We've put together a very large-scale consortium of training material, educational material for medical students, where you don't actually have to learn how to code these things up, but there's a series of problems. And so here's what we're calling the Pitt AI Academy. It's goofy, I know, but whatever. Um, where we sort of talk about AI, ML, and the various different types. So, non-generative AI is what's called here. I called it traditional. And then there's generative AI. And then there's a series of different uses of this that you can see where we've taken real medical data and given you classification problems, et cetera. And so the idea here is that doctors in the future are going to end up working with AI in some way or another. And we want them to understand the strengths and weaknesses of AI. And so this is not yet announced, but it'll be announced end of February is kind of what we're targeting right now. There's lots of other faculty learning opportunities because we realize not everybody has studied. So, LinkedIn has some reasonable classes. We've made that available to our faculty. There's per school educational seminars. Let me just pick one example. So going back to the concern about will AI replace me, it's helpful to actually have data. We're lucky to have a professor here who studies AI effect on early careers. So he just gave a talk at our School of Computing and Information Science. We have multiple courses from what we call Pitt Digital. That's our IT providers. And they tend to focus on a particular tool. If you want to use ChatGPT, if you want to use Anthropic's system, they'll be training on how to do that. And then we do workshops of various type. I was just yesterday at a digital health summit where our students were working pretty extensively with AI in the medical space, and UPMC is there, et cetera. So just to close this out, we also have made available infrastructure for faculty that want to teach AI in one way or another. So we have a centralized facility that provides high performance computing capabilities. And what we do is we take the systems that are nearing end of life and we move that into a teaching facility. And so we've got about more than 1,000 students a year that make use of this teaching facility. TikTok chime here refers to our purchasing plan. So we purchase an initial generation of hardware. There's usually a couple, 3 years later, a major revision or improvement on a given architecture. So we make a second buy, and then another 2 or 3 years later, we basically take all of that computing equipment and we move it into our teaching facility and make it available through our classes. So we've got over 1,000 students a year that are using this facility. It's pretty nice. It's a unified class virtual environment where you use Jupyter Hub to set everything up. It sets up an entire environment for you. And then if you have a student that is in the class, all they have to do is log on to this one facility and they get an exact copy of something that the professor set up using a customization software that we developed at Pitt. If WVU has a similar facility and would like to use it, just ask. We'll happily share that with you. We designed the software. We're making it available to universities across the country right now. This was a major effort of mine and my collaborators in the CRCD. Okay, so that's education. Let's talk about research. As I said, that initial committee said we needed to make available a wide range of tools. It's not clear which is best or what each is best for, so we have made a wide range of tools available. Anthropic's Claude for Education is the most recent thing that we've made available. Microsoft's Copilot chat is available. Google Gemini is available. Um, we created something called Pitt GPT. I'll show you a slide on exactly what that is. Um, and Zoom's AI companion. And the trick with all of these things is that when they initially came out, the agreement that the companies wanted to make was, we'll give you our tool for free or nearly nothing in exchange for us owning all of the intellectual property that comes out of that. And so Pitt was like, no, we're not doing that. And so it was a major effort for us to negotiate with each of these companies a reasonable price where we still maintained our own intellectual property. And then we also make available things like Copilot for Office 365 and Teams Premium. But those things are things that cost money, and the faculty has to pay up for that. I don't know if we'll keep all of these things around. Right now, what we tried to do is make a lot available, and that will, at some point, we'll cut things down. So that's research using AI systems by others. We also make available in that same TikTok Chime High Performance Computing Center equipment for doing your own research. So if you wanted to train your own large language model within reason, you can go off and go do that. We bought a bunch of high performance NVIDIA computes with the appropriate amount of RAM. But those things were purchased. They're literally rolling out in the next, actually maybe a week ago, they were officially available for the first time. And what we're putting together now is large language model as a service where you can adapt or build on to the large language model for all kinds of different inferencing jobs. And I'll give you an example on the next slide of the sorts of research that we do. And the idea is that we make multiple pre-configured foundational model from Hugging Face, if you know what that is, or from other places as well. Facebook's made their model available. We still don't know quite what the cost model of this is going to be. We're still figuring that out. But just to give you an idea of like what does Pitt do with all of these things? So let me give you two examples. These are my favorites, but there are so many good ones here. In the civil engineering space, Professor Amir Alavi is using generative AI to create new structures that have different mechanical properties. So this happens to be showing you something being built in steel. You can imagine building bridges that are as strong as today's bridges, but have, about 30% less material. Or use the same amount of material, but is substantially stronger. And, while some of these shapes might be things that you can imagine designing, many of these things are non-obvious, non-intuitive. But by automating the process of having generative AI create and optimize these shapes for a particular purpose, you can then, do analyses on these things and see that they actually have achieved that. So he's worried about that for bridges. He's worried about this for things like sound barriers on the side of roads. And then the most recent research is on, replacing things like mechanical discs for spines. Instead of it being steel, you can imagine building these things so that they have some sort of compression if it's a disc, or have the right hardness if it's a bone material. And that the benefit of that is that you'll no longer be damaging the bone itself. We also do work on things like sepsis treatment. A huge number of people die worldwide from sepsis. You have to figure out what type of sepsis they have, and it turns out that for some people, that are indicated here, they will die very, very quickly if you don't treat them quickly. So you can use this process of identifying which phenotype somebody's in to determine who should get treatment first. And then it turns out that the exact treatment that they need differs a little bit. And if you don't get it exactly right, people will end up dying. So we've done a lot of work on being able to identify that phenotype, figuring out what the treatment is, and then prioritizing who gets care. Just to give you a couple of examples. All right, let's finish with operational. So we've created this thing called Pitt GPT. It's at the back end, it's ChatGPT, but we are hosting it locally because it costs us less. And you can do things like create a job description, find certain types of learning, or I guess this is another job description helper of one type or another. So this one's for finding a job. This is for writing a job description. There we go. Um, we've got all kinds of AI Connect tools. So here's one for our payroll department. Hi, I'm Pitsy Payroll, your AI assistant. And so we've built that can, help provide advice to our faculty or staff that need it. And then the last thing, I do a little bit of research myself on institutional animal care and use. I forget exactly which of your faculty was working about that, but in order to do the process of examining animal protocols carefully, you have to know a ton of material, literally thousands of pages of material. Every single protocol that has to be reviewed is 70 to 80 pages long. Just to give you the scale, in the European Union, and there's about 4 million of these a year. Universities can have hundreds or even 1,000 of these. There's a lot. So what we did was we took a look at this, put together a paper that ended up in Nature Lab Animal on thinking about three major issues. One is ethics and bias. How do you make sure that ethical calls are not being done by an AI, which I told you at the start has some problems? Um, how do you make sure that the result you get is robust? And then how do you make sure that it's trustworthy? So what we tried to do for robustness was to develop a template that we could use for checking different aspects of these protocols. And then we verified it on two different large language models. And then in terms of trustworthiness, we tested on one set of animal procedures, and then we evaluated on a totally different set, both quantitatively and qualitatively. If you're not familiar with the process of protocol review, here's roughly how it looks. And let's see, before I even get into it, let me just say that we're trying to address multiple goals, and almost every university does something similar to this with this single processes. We're usually using this to train students, and so we want to make sure that they do learn something through here. But we also have to make sure that the treatment of the animals is humane. And we also want to make sure that the results that we get are world-leading and impactful. So typically, a faculty member and a trainee will design a protocol, and then often it's the trainee that documents it. So they'll document it. There's somebody in the Animal Research Protections Office that does a first review, and they almost always go back to the trainee with, oh, you forgot to do this, oh, you didn't do that, or you didn't have the right connections across these. And then this can actually be a loop, but when it's all done, we send it off to a designated member that has expertise in the particular field that the research is being done on. And that's how we get to the making sure we're doing world-leading, impactful research. There's a little process where we ask questions and provide advice and revise the protocol until we get approval at the very end. It can take a long time, but if we're just focusing on the front end of this material, which is where we're going to do our analysis, it turns out there's a lot of problems in these. So sometimes it's missing information, sometimes it's mismatched sections. If you list person in one place, you actually have to give them a job in another place. If you haven't read those 1,000 pages of materials, maybe you're not following the standards properly. Maybe you haven't used materials or chemicals properly for animal research, or maybe you did some sort of statistical calculation and it wasn't correct. So what we tried to do was find all those sorts of problems. It turns out they mostly appear on the front end. And the idea would be we would use AI to provide this first round of feedback if you could, and to help the trainees, and then leave this final analysis and ethical considerations for the people at the back end. So here's what the prompt structure looks like. This is an example on the right side, but I'm just going to focus on the left side. So you want to start out by giving the system output customization. Our faculty, our students expect polite responses, professional tone, and so we tell the system to do that. It turns out that these systems can't absorb 1,000 pages of pretty dense legal material, so we had to cut out the right pieces and provide that as context. We have to provide detailed questions. We want to make it easy for people to understand. So there's a visualization things, green check marks, incorrect red X's. And then we want things to be able to summarize for a person and explain if they made a mistake so they know what to do to fix it so that they can do that loop fast. So we're going to roll this out this spring. Whereas this process can take a couple of weeks, this process takes about 8 seconds. So that's a pretty big win for turning around and getting feedback. And that's just one example of the many ways that we're trying to roll this out into operations in a way that's responsible and ethical. Sorry, so let me wrap up here. So I think the AI opportunity is absolutely real. Certainly those who are selling AI are hyping this a lot, and you certainly hear that in the popular press. But it's not all roses. Today's systems are not infallible, and many users, including some of our students, don't really fully understand this yet. Some of our faculty and staff are afraid of an AI future. Let's see, there's two challenges there. One is I think it's coming no matter what. So we need to embrace it and figure out how to use it. And then the second thing is I don't believe that AI is going to end up replacing us anytime soon. Ethics issues, that's always going to have to be a person. In terms of jobs, when it comes to certain types of creativity, that is still done best by a human, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Here at Pitt, we're supporting and leveraging AI broadly in education and research and operations. I tried to give you a couple of examples of each just to give you a flavor of what we're doing. I might have made it sound like it's more coordinated than it actually is. We're a big university. We like to say, more than 30,000 students and more than 7,000 faculty. And although we try to coordinate and provide the right resources, the reality is that each of the schools and each of the departments are doing something in these areas themselves. Sometimes they'll ask us for some help, and we provide it as best we can. But it's a broad distributed effort overall. And then finally, we're still in the early days of an AI revolution. And so I'm going to finish up where I started. Like, new thoughts in this area are absolutely welcome. And if at any time WVU would like to collaborate with Pitt, now you know who I am. Now you've got my contact information. Please reach out. I'd be happy to talk with you, and maybe we can figure out something to do together. So with that, let me wrap up and take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Robert. That was really, really nice. I really appreciated that you take the time to share all of that with us. And let me open the floor for questions then. Don't be shy.
I've stunned everybody.
Okay, let me start myself then with one. I have several of them, but I have one of them. What is the position of the university with respect to open source models, especially from those coming from China?
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for starting with an easy question. Yeah, so academic freedom is a thing, and some of our faculty want to work with that. The trick is, I think we don't have an official position, right? Because the administration doesn't have an official position. What I have seen us do is that if what you're doing is you're using the open source models from China to understand what they're good at and what they're not good at, that's great. That's a useful thing. If it comes to using the models that come from China as part of our operational activities, we're not doing that at all. So there's this really interesting dance that we're doing. In operations, we're using US developed, US models. If research involves studying or understanding where these things are good and where they're not good, we let that happen as well. We're willing to run it on our computing cluster, for example, but of course, with the right security protections in place to the degree that we understand what the right security protections are.
Right. Thank you, Robert. Casey, you have a question.
Yes, thanks. I'm Casey Jackson. I direct the WVU Advanced Center, and I'm a professor of women's and gender studies here. And thank you, Rob, for your talk. It was really nice to see a strategic approach laid out kind of from the top to the bottom. And I really appreciated how you sort of initiated it with partnering with your campus teaching and learning center. And so I guess I'm really interested in, like, when you think about faculty professional development in particular, like what kind of levers or partnerships are you using to take a holistic approach? And particularly given that this is you outlined really well all of the various aspects of change and how they can threaten, trigger people's fears. And, of course, at WVU, we've already gone through rounds of academic transformation. So I'm sort of looking for models, like how are you approaching the change process itself and drawing on your campus resources to develop the culture around AI?
Yeah, well, so you saw a little bit about, what we made available through our teaching and learning facility. Those folks are great. It was not an accident that we had a leader there chair that very first committee that we put together, right? And that person had some expertise in AI, but like that wasn't a big research effort at the point. But that person has taken it and run with it. So we had a person who led that effort for us, and then was enthusiastic enough that they are continuing to lead in that area, to follow the literature themselves, and then are helping grow things. So first thing is, we were I would say smart in picking talented people at the beginning, and then the exciting thing is that those folks got excited and are continuing to roll things out. So Teaching and Learning Center, it's not like it was a one and done thing for them. They are continuing to work on it, and when they ask for resources, we do everything we can because they're important for our university and for, as you say, making sure we're making use of the expertise that we already have. So that's one thing. And the second thing is, on these ground up or bottom up sorts of approaches. So I mentioned this Rethinking the University committee that was put together. That was put together by the ethics professor that ran that initial committee with us in collaboration with our law school. And so I'm sure you have read in the paper about lawyers who used generative AI to write legal briefs and got in a lot of trouble because they did not understand that these systems can confabulate. So our law school kind of jumped on this idea, and there's one professor there that realized, oh my gosh, if we're going to have law students get degrees from us, we have to have them realize that this is a tool, but it's not infallible. So, second thing is just anytime these things pop up, we do what we can to support. I participate in that meeting, and if that team needs anything from our office, I try to make it available to them just because they're doing something I think is really important. So I don't know, lots of little examples of things like that. Maybe I'll pause there. Hey, Sheena.
Hey, Rob.
Tina has a question.
Thank you for the talk. Rob, I think you're a little bit of a unicorn in that you're an administrator who understands AI. So, sometimes these things are kind of top-down driven. And so the Venn diagram of administrators overlapping with the Venn diagram of people who have a knowledge of AI can be very limited in circumstances. So how would you recommend a university navigate that challenge?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I will mention, so I work for Rob Rutenbar, who is an electrical engineer and who develop chips that are used for accelerating AI. So I'm lucky enough to have that. So I might be a unicorn, but I am in an office of unicorns. When it comes to other universities, I've seen exactly what you've seen. Many people are not as aware of what things can be done. So I think the first thing is to start with the people. And part of the reason I started my talk with saying people are really concerned about this is that it's very, very important to recognize that that's a real concern. However, it's also absolutely true that companies are investing billions of dollars. The federal government has seemed to focus a large portion of its research dollars on AI. So this is a thing that is coming. The question is exactly what is it going to do? What is it going to be available? So my first advice to other administrators is this is a thing that's coming. We have to think about it. We have to wrestle with it. And the earlier we do that, the better we do that. And we have to do it in a way that is respectful of the people whose jobs will be affected. From personal experience, so I put together my first AI tool back in, I guess, the mid 1990s, believe it or not. I built a couple of tools. Maybe the one I can talk about is I built an intrusion detection system that the Air Force used for a year or so before commercial industry started doing something similar. It had AI built into it. People then were worried that the people who were responsible for monitoring the security of our systems would lose their jobs. They did not lose their jobs. And that, like, I've seen this happen 4 or 5 times. Almost always what ends up happening is AI picks up something so that you end up focusing on something different. And there are many things that humans do that are better. And so I guess my second piece of advice would be, it's coming. Recognize that people are concerned about it, but think about how this could adapt the world in a way that's positive for the people that are working at your university. Anyway, just a few thoughts, a few initial thoughts.
Thank you, Robert. Any other question?
Yeah.
I've got it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ivan.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Rob. Thanks so much for your talk. I'm just curious. You show that Pitt is investing on, all the hardware for future using of AI. And I'm just curious, how much of this is used right now, specifically the biomedical area using this hardware, and how do you see in the future, like Pitt developing more, new large language models and stuff like that?
Yeah, so good. So I don't have all the answers. Part of the reason I showed you how many people are using our AI system for training is I had hard numbers, right? We had more than 1,000 students that are actively using it. We have a shared research cluster that's heavily used right now. We've gotten a number of donations to increase that cluster. I can tell you numbers of hours, perhaps, if I dug through some background. I would say it's very heavily used. I can't give you like what percentage of our faculty are actively doing AI because we don't break down the use of the cluster quite that way. Here's what I can say. Pitt, there's different ways that you could do research on AI. So some universities spend a lot of time and effort like redesigning the underlying generative AI models. And we have 1 or 2 faculty that do that. We don't have a ton. So I used to work at MIT. MIT does a bunch of that. I sit next to Carnegie Mellon University. I worked there for a short period of time. They do a bunch of that. We tend not to do that as much. What we tend to do is use AI. And so in the research space, like I was at this meeting I mentioned just yesterday, and I would say there's like 60 or 70 student-led papers that came out of our medical school where they were using AI in some aspect of patient care or analysis of data or understanding of underlying phenotypes. That's why I chose one example in that space, just to give you a sense of it. So I would say a lot of people are playing with it. A lot of people have a sense that it can be useful. A major concern that I have not brought up yet is related to the confabulations. Doctors and patients have trust issues when it comes to using AI, and those are well-founded right now. And so the question is, how do you build something that's reliable enough, but still thinks about the ethics and has a human involved in assessing that? So there's a lot of important research still to be done, even on the improving the quality of care you're getting and on the use of it.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of talks, so maybe we should move to the next.
Thanks so much. And I mostly ask you that because, I can definitely see that WVU and Pitt could potentially, a lot of us, we would love to collaborate with you guys in the future. And, that'll be great. But by the way, I'm a Pitt alumni. I don't say it too loud around here, but yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Ivan. Gretchen.
Yeah, thank you. Rob, you brought up, Shana brought up a really good point about concerns about people losing their jobs. In our department, which is the IRB, my interest in AI, or part of it, is just the opposite, which is we have limited staff and a large burden of submissions that are coming through, and our staff is overwhelmed answering these questions. And so your IACUG model was really interesting to me because what you lined out is identical to what the IRB review process looks like. It's the same thing. So has Pitt got anything in mind for trying this with the Institutional Review Board?
Yeah. I was having a beer last night with my co-author on the IACUG thing, and that was he asked me the same thing. So Rob, let's get to the IRB. Can we make some progress there as
Quickly,
well?
please.
Quickly. Yeah. So yes, it's clearly on the radar, and you're exactly right. The process is very similar for humans as it is for animals. We're going to try and roll this thing out with the animals first. We're working with Huron on that, but there's actually two companies that are interested in licensing this. I don't know if they actually will. We'll see. But yes, I will eventually get to the IRB thing as well, but it'll take me a little while. And maybe they will too, because like once you sort of publish the approach, people are like, oh, that makes a ton of sense. And there are a lot of ways you can do this, right? So just for awareness, I shared early results with our CMU colleagues that were working in this space. And their response was, let's have the AI do the whole job. And my response was, that's the wrong model. And so I had to do a little more work, but I think I have convinced them. But it's not at all clear that like the fact that we chose to do that, like that was very intentional. And we had to spend a bunch of time working through alternatives. And it's not clear to me that everybody else is totally settled on that, but I'm convinced that that's the right model. And I got a Nature paper out of it. So, hey, that's a cool thing. So, all right.
Lynette?
Yes, thank you so much for your talk. I appreciate the breadth of it. And to that end, for those of us who do have some education in how to use AI, what you're doing exists in sort of like two worlds, both academia and industry. Where do you get your information about what's the next big thing? And can you give us a couple, like Gretchen had just mentioned, Huron, for instance, where do you learn these things?
Yeah. Okay. So up until the current administration, I was a member of the Air Force's Scientific Advisory Board. And I led the AI study for the last Secretary of the Air Force. The people who serve on that board are chief technology officers of big companies. And when we went out and wanted to have people talk to us, like the chief technology officer of OpenAI was more than happy to talk to us. Google shared what they were doing, and we had to like be careful. So I would just go straight to these companies, and I had enough clout at the time to be able to ask them. Okay. As you heard at the beginning, I mentioned that the person who's responsible for Microsoft's 365 effort is a friend of mine, used to work for me.
Yeah.
So there's I don't know if that's replicable, right? So it's just that I have these connections from other jobs, and that was useful. Okay. And then there's a bunch of really good folks online. Let me mention one. Let's see if I can find it very quickly here. Boy, I cannot find it right now. There's a couple of online communities that I read, and I tend to be a little bit of a skeptic about where AI can be used because I know that it's not perfect. So,
Robert, if you find it, just send it to me, and I will share it with the group.
I will. Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
You are the last but not the least, please.
All right, yeah, thanks. And I'll just make this brief. But to two of the comments, and for Gretchen here, I'm on the so I'm the chair pediatrics, and I'm on the risk advisory committee, which is IRB for the institution. So IRB is like, what are the risks to the patient? Is it okay for them to join this study? And then the RAC committee is it okay for us as an institution to join this committee? And there's a lot of stuff, right? 100-page protocols, obscure cancer inhibitor molecules. We can't keep it straight. So I use the Chinese, Alibaba. We have Qwen 3 loaded in our hospital's data center. So I don't send it out to the frontier models. I don't send it out to ChatGPT, these 100-page protocols, but I use our internal data center one for confidentiality, agreement reasons, and I will ask it questions. So Gretchen, if you find that interesting, and if you're IRB crew, we can probably get you access to that, and you can start working with different prompts and stuff. And then Aldo, if this is interesting, if you want to check out our hospital's data center, had it loaded for a month or more before they let us start using it, because security team was analyzing it to make sure it wasn't sending any secret messages back to China or anything, or I don't know what they were analyzing it for, but I just share that. And so this is
Chuck,
all.
thank you.
So let me just finish up with one last thing then. So I get to work with Sheena on APLU things. So my boss, Rob Rutenbar, is the head of the research committee for APLU. And what he proposed, and I wrote the questionnaire for this, is that we do a survey of all of the ways that universities are using AI operationally. And so we're going to pull that together. APLU is going to pull that together and then make that available to you all, because you're a member of APLU. And examples like what Chuck just brought up will be available. You can look at what other universities are doing and then find the right contact point for adopting things if it makes sense for WVU.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Chuck, for that beautiful question. I love how we end up. Thank you, everyone. And I will try to share the link for the recording of the talk later on today or Monday. Thank you, Rob. Have a wonderful Friday and enjoy the weekend then with that beautiful weather that is coming by.
Thank you all. See you later.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you around. Bye.